Welcome again to Warehouse and Operations as a Career. I'm Marty, and we're grateful that you stopped in for a visit today. You know, I've gotten way behind on a couple of questions, and I thought we'd try to do a little catch-up this week. First off, I'd like to talk about the receiving position today. In the distribution world, our freight comes in on trailers or containers, usually if merchandising has their days on hand figured correctly, by appointment, and arrives on time to be unloaded. As we've discussed in earlier episodes, a driver will check in and either unload his or her freight themselves or hire an unloading service to break the load down and stage it for the receiver. I mention all this because all of this stuff actually can fall under our responsibility as receivers. In most facilities, especially the larger distribution centers, the receiver is tasked with not only receiving the product, but he or she will oversee the entire front dock or the front of the house responsibilities. I'm fortunate enough to visit several DCs each week, and the receiving process is pretty consistent throughout the industry. I thought maybe we could just walk through the day in the life of the receiver. Of course, we'll be arriving on time for our shift, and our first task will be to punch in on the time clock. Here's a real quick story. I think I've mentioned something like this before, but a young gentleman forgot to punch in one morning last week, so his time was, of course, skewed by almost half a day. His supervisor and payroll, well, they missed the correction, and he hadn't mentioned it to anyone all week long. Well, Friday afternoon came along, and it's like 5 p.m., he noticed his check was a little light. Of course, he was upset, and although it was explained that it'd be taken care of next week, and that, after all, it is his responsibility to punch correctly, and or at least notify his supervisor of any corrections that are needed. His solution was just not to show up for his shift on Saturday. Now, the no-call, no-show was recorded, and now he's seeking, other employment. I guess he feels that he got his point across, though. Anyway, so we've punched in, and we're wearing all of our required PPEs. We'll probably start out by stopping by the inbound check-in desk and review or pick up our copy of the load schedule for that day. We'll verify all the first wave trucks are in their doors and go pull their PO or purchase order sheets. The purchase order is what will be verifying the items that merchandising purchased, the correct quantities, colors, pack sizes, etc. That what was shipped to us is what our merchandising department actually ordered. Now, when each truck checks in, they'll present us with a BOL or bill of lading. And I found some really good information at freightquote.com. They explain that the bill of lading is a required document to move a freight shipment. The bill of lading, or BOL, works as a receipt for freight services, a contract between a freight carrier and shipper, and a document of title. The bill of lading is a legally binding document providing the driver and the carrier all the details needed to process the freight shipment and invoice it correctly. It'll include information like, and I really do like the way that they broke this down. They kind of titled it, What's in a Freight Bill of Lading? It'll have the full names and addresses of both the shipper and the receiver, or the consignee, and it needs to be legible because this is a legal document. It should give us the purchase order or any kind of special reference numbers, maybe special instruction. This is where we'll note instructions for the carrier. They're not really extra service requests like lift gates or delivery notifications, but pretty much anything special that the carrier may need to know. Of course, it'll need to give us the pickup date and possibly the appointment or scheduling information, a description of the items, the packaging type. We're going to want to know if it's cartons or crates or pallets or maybe even drums. It'll give us the freight class. And as we've learned, there's like 18 to 20 different classes of freight based on weight, maybe dimensions, density, storage capacity, things like that. And there'll be a line for the hazardous material designation for the Department of Transportation. FreightQuote.com has a really nice sample freight BOL for you to look at. And again, WAOC isn't affiliated in any way, but I did like their information. You ought to check them out. So we'll take that bill of lading with our PO, and we'll start walking the dock, checking that all the stacked pallets have been configured properly. Meaning that they are stacked with the right tie and height. Remember what we've learned. A tie is how many cases are layered on the pallet, and the high is how many of those layers is on the pallet or how high it is. As an example, a tie high of 7.5 would be 7 cases per layer and 5 layers high. It's our responsibility to confirm the pallet is one item or SKU or stock keeping unit. And just for information, a SKU is usually a string of 8 alphanumeric digits that we'll be using in-house, whereas a UPC or Universal Product Code is typically a string of 12 numeric digits and is always going to be the same for the product no matter where it is. We could probably do a whole show on SKUs and UPC codes and barcoding. There's so many barcode formats out there. So anyway, we've confirmed the items have been segregated correctly, stacked properly, and the count matches our PO. So now we're ready to attach a barcoded tag to it in the lower right-hand corner of the pallet, or scan a barcode, which is automatically placing the product into our WMS or warehouse management system. After we've checked the entire load, pulling out or notating any damage cases, we're going to reconcile those counts between the purchase order and the bill of lading. If all of the above doesn't sound like a lot of responsibility, we're now ready to sign the driver's bill of lading, which essentially is like writing a check for that entire load. As a receiver, once we release the load, sign the bill of lading, and hand it over to the driver, we relinquish all disputes or claims with that load. And as a receiver, we're going to be doing that all day long. I once made a $89,000 mistake on a load of meat. Only about half of the pallets was actually on the truck. I was kind of in a hurry and just counted the pallets from across the dock. I handed the bill of lading to the driver and went over to tag the pallets and saw immediately that I was short. Luckily, the driver had stopped off at the restroom, and I was able to get the paperwork back from him. I marked everything short that I needed to, and I helped him call, his claims department to get it all sorted out. I don't want to think about what would have happened if I couldn't have caught up to him. And all that brings me to today's question. How long do I have to work here before I can be a receiver? They make more money than I do. Now, this gentleman doesn't mention where he's actually working. It looks like he's been a forklift driver for about 3 months, though. I don't really know that there's a timetable, really. I believe it'll depend on how much responsibility that we've shown our management team, and how much that we can really handle. My suggestion was that he visits with his supervisor. Let him or her know what his goal is. They may not even know that he'd like to make the move. I can tell you, though, it'll help to know every item in your facility. Know how the paperwork flows and who you can contact for help. We hadn't even spoke to the possible regulatory concerns with the receiving yet. Things like country of origin tagging, temperature recording, trailer condition report. Things like the OS&D reporting or overshort and damage claims. As receivers, it's our responsibility from the time it's taken off of the trailer until it's placed in the rack by the fork driver. Now, all that sounds like a whole lot of responsibility, doesn't it? As we've learned, the more responsibility a position has, the more money it's going to pay. Well, there's a little on the receiving task. I myself loved receiving. I did lose quite a few nights' sleep as a receiver, but I really enjoyed the job, and I encourage everyone not to shy away from it just because of the responsibility. Be sure and please send us an email to host@warehouseandoperationsasAcareer.com and share your receiving stories with the group. Better yet, use that little @ WHSEANDOPS and post them to our Facebook and Twitter feeds. I'd love a good discussion on receiving. Let's all bring up a safety topic at tomorrow's startup meeting and keep someone safe for the day.